A warm welcome to the students who is watching this video. Today's topic of lecture is the second practical in this semester, which is IDEAS. IDEAS, Indian Disability Evaluation and Assessment Scale. It is a scale for measuring and quantifying disability in mental disorders. Now, a little historical background about the scale. Before you watch this video fully, I would recommend every one of you to first read the Disabilities Act, that was Persons with Disabilities Act, that was passed in 1995, and also try to understand the uh, features of the act which talked about the psychologically ill people. So, starting with this, how the scale came into being. Since the enactment of the People with Disabilities Act, PTA 1995, with psychologically ill persons, there was always a search for a suitable scale, which could quantify and evaluate the disabilities a person experienced because of their or her own psychiatric illness. And this task of coming up with a reliable, valid, and quantifiable scale was being taken up by the Executive Council of Indian Psychiatric Society, Pune, to develop it. And the project was headed by Dr. R. Thara and Dr. T. Murali. Their main objective, as they had put it, was to lessen the sorrow and suffering of mentally distressed people and the caregivers of our country. It is when a person experiencing a psychological disorder, it is not just the individual who is suffering on his or her own, but it's also the caregivers who are attending to the person 24 hours a day. Their lives also becomes very psychologically stressful, and we also have to understand what are the psychological processes that each of these caregivers go through. What can we as psychologists do to lessen their burden on of taking care of their psychologically unhealthy individuals in the families. So how can we play a small part in it? So we all have to understand this. So it was a prolonged struggle. As we know, in our country, it was a very long struggle for the recognition and status of psychiatric disability among other disabilities, and it was a milestone in 1995 when this act was introduced. So, data was gathered on the testing population in 8 centers analyzed at SCARF, and these field centers provided valuable feedback on the basis of which further changes were made. So, this tool, the primary objective is to measure the disability for the certification and also incur the benefits for those who are psychologically disabled. So, these were two of the primary reasons. One, you are providing a certification to the individuals who are suffering from chronic psychological distress, and they're using the certification in order to benefit in some way so that the burden on them and their families are lesser. So, who can actually carry out this assessment? Diagnosis and the certification can only be done by the psychiatrist. Administration of ideas scale can be done by trained social workers, psychologists, or occupational therapists. So, you as a psychologist, what the test that you are doing The scores that you will be obtaining, you will forward it to a psychiatrist, and based on that, the psychiatrist can provide the diagnosis and the certification for that particular individual. So you would have to be trained in using this scale. The psychiatric disability will also be reassessed every 2 years and recertified. As you know, that the people with psychiatric illness has the capabilities of improving, and that is why we assess the progress that the client has made after every 2 years. So, and then we would also recertify these individuals. The efficacy of using this assessment in rural areas will have to entail further researches and investigations. So, since the scale was developed in an urban psych population, we still have to carefully plan out in using the scale among the population from rural areas. Then, what are the items that are mentioned in the test? So, there are basically four items. The first of it is self care, it includes taking care of body hygiene, grooming health, including if you're able to take bath by yourself, if you're able to go to the bathroom and relieve yourself, if you're able to dress yourself up, if you're able to eat by yourself or you require assistance, and how much you're able to take care of your health. So you would be asking questions such as, does he look after himself, wash his clothes regularly, take a bath, and brush his teeth? So, you know that the person's psychological disorder could be grave and he might not be capable of answering you at that very moment. So, you can direct these questions to the primary or the secondary caregiver of the client. Some more questions which you can ask for self care is, does he take food of the right quality and the quantity? Does he have regular meals? Does he take care of his personal belongings with reasonable standards of cleanliness and orderliness? Does he also seek treatment for health conditions and comply with advice? And based on what the primary caregiver or if the client is saying, you would be scoring them out of these. So, 0 if the client is able to do all of it, there is no disability. 1 is mild disability. 2, moderate. 3, severe. The person is not able to do this by himself and is under great distress and profound. He has to be assisted at all times. So, based on this, you're going to put down your scores for the client. Moving on, the second item which is mentioned in the test is interpersonal activities or social relationships. So it includes the patient's ability to form and maintain social relationships. And as we have understood as psychology students, when Maslow introduced the hierarchy of needs, he said that in the third need, belongingness need, all of us human beings, we have a desire to form affiliations with people. We have a desire to maintain and seek relationships with people. And for this very statement that he had put, and so many researchers have supported that human beings are a social animal. They need to have social relationships around by themselves. Even an introvert will have someone in their life whom they can completely confide their trust in. So you would also be objectives under this item is the ability for emotional response, such as showing of tolerance, responding to criticism or praise, and love and affection. If the client is still showing that, but in cases of extreme psychological disorders such as schizophrenia, the client might show blunted effect of emotions, or they can show no emotions at all. So you would have to rate the client on the basis of what the caregivers are telling you. And also, you would be, as a psychologist, you would be putting down your observations of the client also into this data gathering process. And also, activities, this interpersonal activities also includes activities of engaging in physical intimacy and interacting in a socially appropriate manner. Is the client experiencing reduced social communication skills or excessive social communication skills? So you would need to probe into these factors. So some of the guiding questions in order to understand this item more is, what is his or her the behavior with others? Do you think his behavior in social situations such as at work or social gatherings or at family gatherings appropriate? Is he able to regulate the verbal and the physical aggression when he communicates with people? How does he behave with strangers? Is he able to maintain friendship? Does he show physical expression of affection and desire? And based on the scoring items from 0 to 4, you would be rating the client. The third item on the scale is communication and understanding. So, what is it? This item tries to understand the spoken and the non-verbal messages that the client is able to carry out. So, ability to produce meaningful messages in order to communicate with others, ability to converse in groups, use of communication devices like telephone, mail, internet. Is there any reduction or is there any overactivity of these behaviors that are to be considered? So, all modes of communication you have to consider in this item. So, what could be some of the guiding questions to score this item is he able to start, maintain, and end a conversation? Are others able to comprehend his communication? Many a times, with patients with schizophrenia, when they start communicating, they jump from one topic to the other without any relevance and coherence to what they speak. So it becomes extremely difficult for the receptor, the person with whom they're talking, to really understand what the client is saying. So, you would need to probe into these areas in order to gain more information about communication and understanding. You would also have to note down your observations as a psychologist. Some other questions is, do you need to encourage him to be more communicative, or does he indulge in reading, writing, and other communication such as telephone, email conversations, and so on? And based on the responses that is being given to you, you are going to score the client on this item from 0 to 4, with 0 being no disability. Mild, the patient is described as uncommunicative, no active avoidance but only expresses or speaks when spoken to, could have some difficulty in comprehension, so you would give it a score of 1. You would give it a score of 2, that is moderate, if they have a narrow range of communication. So, communication could be too brief or too much excess, incomplete or incomprehensible. So, you would be scoring the client 2. 3, severe, evidence of more generalized active avoidance of any kind of communication, and there is some serious difficulty in comprehension. You would give a score of 4 if all communication is nil or a bare minimum. So, communication is totally incomprehensible. So, you would give it a score of 4. So, based on this, This is the third item which is actually being mentioned in the test. The very last item of it is work. So it includes three areas, that is employment, housework, and education. So performing at work or employment, okay? So you would be asking the informants about if the client is working, if she or he is getting paid, if he or she is skipping work, how much is the client able to perform the task, is he able to complete the task at a proper time, and if he is searching for a job, what is the consistency in the client in searching for a job. Then the performance at housework is the client able to maintain cooking, caring for other people at home, taking care of other people at home. So it measures the ability to take responsibility and perform household tasks completely and efficiently with proper time. Last is performing in school and colleges, and this can measure performance in education related tasks. So you would be you would be asking questions in this domain, such as is he or she employed, is he or she a house manager, a student. If employed, does he go to work regularly, does he like his job, is he coping well with it, how is his competency in work. So you would give a score of 0, which is no disability, if the patient is going to work regularly, is able to give a proper output, given the which are within the acceptable norms of the job. But you would give it a score of 1, which is mild, if there is a noticeable decline in the patient's ability to work, to cope and meet the demands of work. You would give it a score of 2, moderate, if there is declining work performance, frequent absence, lack of concern about all of these, and financial difficulties are also, seeming that it's increasing day by day. You would give it a score of 3, which is severe, if there is marked decline in work performance, disruptive at work, unwilling to adhere to disciplines of work, threats of losing his or her job. And lastly, you would give it a score of 4 if the person has largely been absent for work, termination, unemployed, making no efforts to find a job. Based on the client, the age, the educational and the professional qualifications, you would be improvising the questions that you ask the client, and you would be scoring the client. So these are the four items which are there in the ideas scale. So there are some description. So ideas is suitable for measuring and certifying disability. It is a brief and simple instrument which can even be used in busy clinical settings. However, some training is highly recommended when you use the idea scale. It has to be used only on outpatients. So only the patient who is coming to the OPD, you can register this scale to the on the clients, and not on those who are the inpatients. The rating should be done according to the interviews of the primary caregivers, and it has to be supplemented by the case history and the patient interview if the patient is able to communicate. Only in rare situations when no primary caregiver is available should the rating be done on the patient interview. But it is highly recommended that you document this process. So you can document this process on a recorder, or you can ask someone to be a witness to the interview, or with the proper permission of the client, or you can also write it down on a piece of paper and keep it as your notes from the session. So they're saying that it has to be documented because many a times there can be changes in information that the client can give you if their psychological disorders are of a serious concern. So this is to only ensure proper treatment of the client, and under no situation and circumstances should this be misused. So it is also recommended that you use the scale only when the caregivers are present. But in situations when they're not present, then you can use any of the above mentioned options. So the gender specification he has been used in the scale. You would be seeing it in the manual that he is used a lot. So this is not to bring in any gender bias, but it's only used for convenience and it refers to both gender. Probe questions, you have to ask more questions in order to guide the interview and identify dysfunction in one or more activities. So the following are eligible for the disability benefits: schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, dementia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. The total duration of the illness should at least be 2 years. For the purpose of scoring, the number of months the patient was symptomatic in the last 2 years, it should be determined. So, based on whatever scores you have given for each item, you would be getting a total score, right? So, this total score you would add the scores of these four items and then you would obtain a total score, and then you would also be asking them about the months of illness in the last 2 years. So if the illness has been less than 6 months, then you would be giving it a score of 1. If it is between 7 to 12 months, you would be giving a score of 2. If it is between 13 to 18 months, you would be giving a score of 3. If it is more than 18 months, then you would be giving a score of 4. And based on this, then finally you will be getting a global disability score, and this refers to total disability score plus the MI2Y score, the duration of months illness score. So you would be getting something in range of 1 to 20. So for the welfare benefits, 40 percentage is the cutoff point. The person would be able to get some welfare benefits. Scores above 40 are categorized as, so for the purposes of welfare benefits, 40% and above is the cutoff point. Above 40 will be categorized as moderate, severe, and profound based on the global disability score. So if you have a score of 0, so it would mean that there is no disability. Between 1 to 7, there is mild disability. A score of 8 and above means um, the a score of 8 and above means that the person falls under the category of moderate, severe, and profound disability who are eligible for the welfare benefits. So 8 to 13 is moderate disability, 14 to 19 is severe disability, and 20 is profound disability. So based on the scoring that you get from the client, you have to write down your results, interpretation, and the conclusion. In the conclusion, you would also be mentioning about the prognosis of the client. And also, in this practical, you would be required to also jot down what are the rehabilitation plans that you can give for a particular client with a particular disability. This is all for today's class. Thank you for patiently listening. I hope you have a good day. Thank you.